The United Nations is set to vote on a resolution condemning the annexation of 4 regions of Ukraine by Russia. Now, the Russians had tried lobbying for a secret ballot instead of a public vote at the General Assembly. The draft, backed by Western countries, calls the annexation illegal and would be similar to the one taken following the 2014 annexation of Crimea. The head of the UN nuclear watchdog agency says Ukraine's biggest nuclear plant has lost all external power needed for vital safety systems for the second time in 5 days. The director of the International Atomic Energy Agency calls it a deeply worrying development. Monitors reported that the interruption in power, saying that backup diesel generators were keeping nuclear safety equipment running. The agency says the situation underscores the urgent need for a protection zone around this facility. And Russia's top domestic security agency says it arrested 8 people in connection with the bombing of that bridge linking Russia to Crimea. A truck loaded with explosives blew up while driving across that bridge Saturday, killing 4 and causing 2 sections to collapse. The FSB says it arrested 5 Russians and 3 citizens of Ukraine and Armenia. Russia says they were taking orders from Ukraine's military, but Ukraine has not directly claimed any responsibility. President Vladimir Putin responded by ordering a barrage of deadly missile strikes across Ukraine. Prime Minister Trudeau and fellow G7 leaders condemned these attacks and said they would stand firmly with Ukraine as long as it takes. And let's bring in CTV's Paul Workman live in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, tracking the developments for us. Paul, the pressure is now on the allies as well to, maybe pony up more help, and it comes in the regard of arms and or aid, I guess, right?
Well, we're going to see more of that today, too. There's a big NATO meeting happening in Brussels. Beyond NATO, in fact, 50 countries altogether that have been brought together largely under an umbrella led by the United States, which, of course, has led the campaign to rearm this country, to give it what it needs to fight against the Russians. And so that meeting today will talk about air defense systems, I suspect, and what more these countries can give, including Canada, to help Ukraine resist the Russian invasion. Of course, they need equipment all the time. They need ammunition. They need uniforms, all of that. And so these periodic meetings are important because money is put on the table, armaments are put on the table that will eventually end up being used by Ukraine.
Paul, the headlines with this war fell below the fold for a number of months. You were there in the early days. You've returned now. What's stood out to you since you've been back on the ground in Ukraine?
Well, I guess certainly there's a greater sense here of resistance than there was before. In those very early days in February when I was here, millions of people were fleeing. It looked very bad for Ukraine. It almost, there was a lot of gloom and doom that this country would not be able to survive the Russian onslaught. They resisted enormously well in Kyiv, keeping the Russians away from taking the capital city in those beginning weeks. And I think that built up a great sense of resilience and pride and strength inside the country that has only grown since because of what we're seeing on the battlefield. The Russians have failed in so many ways to hold territory that they thought they were going to just easily walk over and be able to make part of Russia, and they've gone through this illegal annexation process now that really is not working at all. At the same time as, the Ukrainian army have pushed the Russians back a lot into periods of retreat, and into areas of retreat, sorry. And so in Kyiv, you have a sense, a feeling that maybe this country is actually winning the war and can win the war and force the Russians out.
CTV's Paul Workman live for us in Kyiv. Paul, thank you.
Thanks.